Good evening. It being 6 o'clock, I'll call to order this November 4th, 2024 meeting of the Chelmsford Select Board and notify everybody that the Chelmsford Telemedia is broadcasting it live and taping it for later rebroadcast. And if you would join me in a Pledge of Allegiance.
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, when we first public service announcement this evening, Regina Jackson is here to receive the proclamation for Veterans Day. So, Erin, if you want to read the proclamation.
Town of Chelmsford Proclamation for Veterans Day, Monday, November 11th, 2024. Whereas November 11th was the day on which the armistice ending World War II, World War I was signed, and whereas this day has been set aside to commemorate the men and women of the United States who have honorably served our nation in the armed forces, and whereas on Veterans Day 2024, we offer our support to those veterans who suffer illnesses and disabilities resulting from their service. And whereas there are approximately 3,000 veterans living in the town of Chelmsford, now therefore we, the Chelmsford Select Board, do hereby recognize Monday, November 11th, 2024 as Veterans Day, and on this day urge the residents of Chelmsford to remember the personal contributions of all veterans in their community and nation, and to demonstrate their respect and gratitude in appropriate ways.
Thank you so much. Just want to tell everybody that Veterans Day is next Monday, November 11th, and we will have our Chelmsford Veterans Day observance at Chelmsford Veterans Memorial Park, which is the park beside McCarthy Middle School. Everybody's welcome, 11 a.m., 11:11 at 11. And if you have any questions, please just give me a call. It'll be a beautiful day, great weather. There's no school, so no problems parking. And please, if you have the opportunity, bring your children. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next up, Harrison Mayotte will tell us about the election.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Harrison Mayotte, Departmental Support Coordinator for the Town Clerk's Office, here to provide a quick update regarding tomorrow's general election. In-person early voting ended, and we had 4,308 voters. The polls will be open tomorrow from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., and you can verify your polling location at voteinma.com. Sample ballots are accessible on the town's website and at all of the polling locations and at the town clerk's office in the town office building. Approximately 9,700 vote-by-mail ballots have gone out to date, and we are waiting for approximately 1,400 back. It is important that you return them as soon as possible. Completed mail-in ballots can either be dropped off to the drop box at the front of town offices, hand-delivered to the town clerk's office by 8 p.m. on election night, or mailed. If you are returning your ballot by mail domestically, it must be postmarked on or before November 5th and arrive in our office by November 8th. If you are returning your ballot by mail internationally, it must be postmarked on or before November 5th and arrive by November 15th. Thank you for your attention, and if you have any questions, please contact our office.
Thank you. Okay, we have some more public service announcements.
First, we have an announcement from the Chelmsford Annual Holiday Prelude and Tree Lighting event. This will be held on December 1st from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. And the Holiday Decorating Committee is looking for help on the 1st from 2 to 7 to set up and take down for the event and to help with activities. If you would like to volunteer to help with the event, you can contact Vivian Merrill at 978-973-9596 or at squekers601@yahoo.com. And we have another announcement from the Chelmsford Health Department regarding their free in-home flu vaccines for homebound residents. If you or your loved one finds it difficult to leave the house to get their flu shot, you can call the Chelmsford Health Department to schedule an in-home vaccination. And they can be reached at 978-250-5241. Also from the Chelmsford Health Department, we have an announcement regarding their walk-in flu clinic, which is held every Wednesday, October 2nd through December 18th, from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. at the Health Department at 50 Billerica Road. The clinic is open to anyone 19 years and older, and high doses are available for those 65 years and older. For more information, you can call the Chelmsford Health Department at 978-250-5241. And next, we have another Chelmsford Health Department notice regarding their CPR training, which will be held Thursday, November 7th. It is at the Chelmsford Town Hall from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. The cost is $20, and it is open to Chelmsford residents only. And participants who complete the training will obtain an American Heart Association Heart Saver CPR AED First Aid Certificate that is valid for 2 years. For more information, you can contact the Chelmsford Health Department. And next up, we have an announcement from the Chelmsford Center for the Arts regarding their Karaoke Sober Edition every second Friday of the month. Admission is free. Mocktails are available for purchase and snacks. Again, it's every second Friday of the month from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. at the Chelmsford Center for the Arts in the Cabaret Room. And lastly, for me, we have a notification from the Chelmsford DPW. They are still seeking contractors for snow plowing for the 2024 to 2025 winter season. They have extended the deadline. All completed application packages are now due Friday, November 15th. And the town of Chelmsford is offering a $1,500 incentive payment for each vehicle or piece of equipment registered with the town. And for an application, you can visit www.chelmsfordma.gov. And then Virginia has a couple of announcements.
So one of the question 6 on the ballot tomorrow will be regarding the proposed fire station reconstruction projects for the West Station on Old Westford Road and the South Station on Acton Road. The question would fund construction of the stations that are aging, are presenting health and safety issues for our firefighters, and also taking into account considerations with public safety. There is a website if you have any additional questions, and if you have other questions that you need answered, you're welcome to call either Chief Ryan's office at the fire department or the town manager's office directly. The next announcement is for the Chelmsford Strategic Plan. Again, there is a social pinpoint survey. The website is on the flyer, or you can scan the QR code. The survey is going to close firmly on November 8th, so if you haven't had a chance to weigh in with your own community input, we're encouraging you to please answer the survey questions, and there's also a section where you can provide open-ended input. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that brings us to our public input section of the agenda. Is there anybody that would like to address the board on any topic at this time? Okay, apparently not. And
Nobody on Zoom.
okay, thank you. We'll go then to committee vacancies.
The following committees have vacancies as of November 4th, 2024. The CCA Town Hall Advisory Committee, the Center Village Master Plan Implementation Committee, the Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee, the Commission on Disabilities, the Community Action Program Committee, the Council on Aging Board, the Conservation Commission, the Cultural Council, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, the Historic District Commission, the Holiday Decorating Committee, the Parade Committee, the Personnel Board, the Public Records Advisory Committee, and the Recycling Committee. If you are interested in serving on a town board or committee, please complete an online application on the town website, or you can contact the town manager's office for more information.
And I just want to remind the public, too, that we do have an opening on the planning board that will be filled at our next meeting on November 18th. If you want to apply for that, you can go through the same process as for another committee application, or just submit a letter to the town manager's office, or just show up on November 18th. Okay, we'll go to public hearings, and the first public hearing is a continued public hearing for National Grid for a poll, and Verizon for a poll petition. I know we have at least one person here to speak.
We have one online. Ryan Langlois is on the Zoom, and he can turn his camera on, and once he speaks, you'll see him.
Okay.
Okay.
Good evening, Ryan.
Hello.
Do you want
Um,
to tell us a
good-
little bit about this?
So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the Select Board. I'm here to represent National Grid. My name is Alec Birdsong. I'm here to represent National Grid in the matter of installing a midspan pole between 52 and 53, pole 52 and pole 53 on Princeton Street.
Okay, and the other gentleman here, I don't know your name, so if you want to tell us.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ryan Langlois, and I am also here representing National Grid as the designer on that the midspan pole that's going to be hopefully placed between pole 52 and 53 with your approval.
Okay, anybody have any questions?
Why do you need to do this?
We are looking to install a capacitor bank at that location to better monitor and regulate that area's voltage on the feeder.
I have one more question.
Sure.
The town engineer's letter in the packet, it's, I guess it's not clear to me, there's a statement about the proposed location is within any existing sidewalk. The new pole should be installed to conform to all current ADA requirements for passing zones. Are you planning, I think there might be a word missing from that sentence, are you planning to install the pole in the sidewalk area? Or are you clearing the sidewalk?
Yes.
You will be in the sidewalk?
Yes.
So how do you address safe passage on the sidewalk if you're putting a pole in the middle of the
We're-
sidewalk?
Oh, not in the middle. I'm sorry. It's going to be on the edge of the road, at the edge of the sidewalk, at the edge of the road. It is going to conform to the passing.
So it's
It's going to
not,
allow people to pass.
it's not,
Yes, I'm sorry.
it's not in the sidewalk at all?
Yes, it is on the sidewalk at the edge of the road. I'm sorry. I don't know if the sketch shows.
I can't tell from the
Does it
sketch, that's
just-
why I'm asking. I don't understand where it physically is.
It is going to be on the edge of the road at the edge of the sidewalk. I'm sorry.
So, I think
So I'm sorry, I'm still, when you say at the edge of the road, at the edge of the sidewalk, does that mean at the edge on the outside of the sidewalk or in the sidewalk at the edge?
Can I say something?
Yes,
So it's
absolutely.
going to be in line with all the
Yes.
other poles that are on the sidewalk as well.
Okay.
So we'll meet the same
So-
clearances, the ADA clearances that all the other poles meet on the road.
Is there a map visual of this anywhere?
I think so. No. No, just that sketch plan.
And it's one additional pole, the other two that are in the drawing are already there?
Correct.
So is this real near Vinyl Square? Because you have Middlesex Street and you have Princeton Street, and it almost looks like you can't tell if this is on Middlesex Street or Princeton Street.
It's on Princeton Street. I went to visit it today.
Okay,
Yeah. So it is on Princeton Street. I think that the address, maybe the address is Middlesex Street on the other side, but it is on Princeton Street. And it is marked on the road, in the sidewalk.
I'm sorry, what was the purpose again? You said you're putting what on the pole? Something to monitor? It's a box?
Yes, a capacitor bank.
Do you normally,
It's going to allow national. I'm sorry.
do you always add new poles to put these on? Can they not go on existing poles for some reason? Or is there,
No,
just
we
out
were
of curiosity?
given a. No worries. We were given. I think we were given pole 52, but as it turned out, we couldn't install it at pole 52 due to an issue with the corner on the pole. So how the angle that the wires are going was not going to be good enough.
If I can pull it.
I think the angle was over 30 degrees, and in turn, we couldn't install a guy wire across the street, or pole with a guy wire across the street to stabilize that, due to the fact that it was someone's property, I believe.
Any other questions? Does that clear it up?
Sure. Do they normally go on, do you normally put them on existing poles if you can? Yeah.
Yes, we never opt to put them at span pole unless we have to.
Just wondering if we could see the street view on the map system.
So what will that leave for the distance between, say, 52, 5250, and 53? Is there going to be a very small distance between those, or? I mean, you know, I know usually the distance is about 100 feet. What's the distance going to be between these poles now?
We can have smaller distances, but they weren't extremely close together, if that's your question. I mean, 125 feet is usually very long for a span, so there's more than ample space there for a pole. So that's pole 53, and the other one is pole 52.
Heading down towards the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where you're at. That's why you got the Middlesex Street, because the other side of the property there is Middlesex Street.
And what's across, can you look at
Oh,
what's
sorry.
across the street?
Now we
Houses?
move it back. So
That's-
there's the mill, and basically it's gonna be a mid pole
Mhm.
right around
But
here.
that's not 53 Princeton Street.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, it's across the street from it.
Right. Right.
Okay.
And there's no sidewalk on the other side of the street, so there's no buffer from personal property, is
So you
that?
can see the sidewalk there. and
Yeah,
that's
but
what-
on the
and
other side of the
poles and
street.
sidewalk, and it goes in,
Oh,
and the sidewalks on both sides.
And is that existing pole, the way it's configured, is that ADA compliant, or is that grandfathered out of compliance somehow? I know you said you're gonna put it in exactly the same way the other ones are, but I just don't know what the current ADA compliance.
Well, we're required to meet the standards
You are? Okay.
when we install a new pole,
Okay.
period. So that should be adequate space, but we can always measure it again if you really would like to do that.
what's across the street, Paul? What is the wire? Oh, so there's poles over there already. Oh,
There is?
No, so the
there's wires going across
property-
the street.
the property to the right of the yellow building where Paul was, that's 53 Princeton, and I think that's where you're proposing across the street is the new pole?
No, it's on it's on that side.
No, that's what I'm saying,
Oh, yeah.
across the street.
So it's where the businesses are, it's not where the residential building is.
Okay, does that answer everybody's questions, or?
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with it as long as it maintains the ADA compliance.
Okay, sounds like they have to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
That a DOT road, Paul?
Princeton Street, yes, through Route 3A.
Do you have to get DOT compliance for that as well?
If it's a state road, then yes.
So have they looked at it?
I'm only here for this part of the project, so I can't really answer that
Okay.
question. I know that they
Give
can
me
take
1 second.
additional time to go through.
Thank you.
To answer that question, I believe I did not find it to be a state road when using the SHAPS, the SHAPS website, which is the DOT website.
Okay, but we have a letter from our DPW engineer that
Right.
says this section of Princeton Street is owned and maintained by the Massachusetts Department of Transportation.
I'm sorry. Maybe I'm mistaken. I will check right now.
References Mass DOT District 4.
You would be correct. That is on. That is. And I am currently pursuing a permit or permits for the Chelmsford area. So
Okay, so that has not been done yet. You still have to do that, correct?
yes, correct.
Okay. Okay, any other questions? Erin, has your question been answered? Okay, this is a public hearing. Is there anybody in the audience here that has any comments or questions about this application? Okay, if not, is anybody else on Zoom?
No.
Okay. We have a motion?
Do we need to make it contingent on the ADA in coordination with the Mass DOT, or is that a given?
I think that's a given.
It's a given. They
Given?
need to
Okay,
know.
thank you.
Gotta close the public hearing.
You can just mention the number, petition number, yeah.
Close the public hearing first.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
And I will make a motion to approve the poll petition for Princeton Street, number 31009470, as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for the time.
Thank you. Have a good night. Thank you for your time.
Okay, we have another public hearing for either an inflammable or flammable storage license, depending on what we have here, for 255 Princeton Street. We have somebody here for this one.
Yeah, and Madam Chair, we are joined online by Town Council Brian Riley, and also Christina Bruce, who facilitated this application, is also online. If the board should need either of their services for this item or the next item.
Okay.
Hello, everybody.
Okay, if you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about why you need this.
Sure. My name is Brian Sora. I'm the Director of Operations for DeLeo Gas, and I'm also joined here by Kushal Gandhi with TCR. So the reason for the permit, or the application, I should say, for 255 Princeton Street, as I'm sure you all are probably aware, there is a development being built out there with which the permanent fuel source there will be electricity through heat pumps and everything. It will be an electric system. However, for the interim of the build as we go into the winter, we are requesting for additional propane storage for temporary heating purposes for the winter months here, for the construction of the buildings themselves. The wintertime generally carries, and with open windows and systems not being complete inside the building, usually calls for a greater demand BTU heating system, with which propane is generally the best way to go. It's the lowest carbon emitter for any of the combustible fuel sources there on site. So you're normally allowed 2,000 gallons capacity, excuse me, for going ahead without an application for flammable storage beyond that. So we're ideally looking for capacity greater than the 2,000 gallons, which is why we're here. We had the opportunity to walk the site with Fire Chief Ryan as well earlier today. He's here as well to help answer any questions. But long story short, we are looking to provide propane storage and propane fuel for the temporary heating of the construction of these buildings at 255 Princeton for these winter months. And so I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have or any members of the public have. And I'm not sure, Kushal, if there was anything you wanted to add to that beforehand, but that's the skinny on that.
Okay, does anybody on the board have any questions?
So in administering temporary heat for your facilities, is that a purchase service in as much as are you renting these tanks and heating equipment, and there's another company that's going to be providing maintenance to the heating equipment, et cetera, or is this within your own group?
Yes, sir. This will all be done by DeLeo Gas. So we will install propane tanks there as well as running the fuel line as well, and then delivering the propane, any propane that's needed from there. The tank and piping equipment for the temporary heat setups will be, ownership will be retained by us. It's propane tanks are ASME certified. They're built to last, the life of homes as they're installed, and they're pretty expensive equipment. So this is something that we do each winter, depending on projects that pop up through the state. So we definitely will retain ownership of that, take that all back in the spring once the heat is no longer required, and that's equipment that we can use for future installs at different towns at different times.
Thank you.
Sounds,
Go ahead.
sounds good to me, it sounds fine to me, but I'd like just to hear the police chief's opinion.
I mean, fire chief?
Fire
You mean fire chief?
Fire chief, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was going to ask him to come up, but
Yeah.
thanks, George.
Sorry. Try to promote.
Good evening, board members. I've been out there. The use of propane is customary for commercial, residential. Why it's before you is because they're proceeding very quickly on this project. So typically in the past, Kenlock, other projects that we've worked on, it's been below the 2,000 gallons.
Right.
So we permit it, but because of the rapid pace of the build, that's why they need a little more.
Okay. So
But we're fine with
You're
this.
okay with it?
Yeah, we are.
Thank you.
Okay.
I have a question.
Virginia, go ahead.
So from the drawings, you're looking at 4 tanks?
Yes, miss, for building 3, which is the most immediate
Yeah.
need, 4 tanks is what we are looking to do. We've added, in theory, some tanks if, in the case, building 2 were to need it down the road. Our assumption right now is building 2 won't be ready for any sort of heating by that time, so it's not likely, but we figured we'd come in front of the board for all potential needs for propane tanks. But yes, if you look at the drawings, it would be 2 sets of 2 1,000-gallon tanks, which that in itself would
so
go
it's
above the
8.
2,000.
Okay, so I'm just counting the red boxes. Does that represent 4 tanks or 8?
It could be as many as 8, depending on how the timeline goes. In a perfect world, 3 could wrap up, and then we take those tanks and provide them at another location. All of which would be within the inspector's approval, 25 feet from
And they're
buildings
at
and crash
they're-
protection.
when I see the parking areas, that's the edge of the parking areas for your development? It's not the edge of the neighboring? So how far in are you off the edge of your property? Because you're at a higher elevation than the neighboring communities.
Yes, so we do have legal requirements, both state, federal, national fire prevention. We need to be at least 25 feet from a property line, as well as 25 feet from a building. So at the very least that, Kushal may know a little bit better as to the property line, but.
So we are well into the property. This is probably 200 feet inside our property.
I'm sorry, probably what?
It's probably on 200 feet inside our
Inside the
property.
property.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is a question for the chief or the applicant, but how do they typically require, like if there's a leak in the tank, is there some kind of a built-in containment? So that you
Yes.
don't have, if there's a leak, it's not like going down into the surrounding neighborhoods?
So that's a very good question to ask. So generally with propane, where it does differ from, say, oil systems, you generally don't have a containment system because propane is naturally non-toxic. It's best to let it dissipate into the air.
Does it evaporate?
It does, yes. Yep. So in these types of situations, I mean, one thing we do with any and all of our systems is once we complete the installation, we need to do proper, this is part of the inspection process anyways, but we will make sure that everything is sealed up in terms there's no pressure loss or anything like that before beginning systems. And then when we go make deliveries, we're always checking at that time as well, making sure that there's been no leaks that have been created in the meantime. So leak mitigation is definitely one of our highest priorities. For what it's worth, propane tanks are federally certified to withstand nuclear blasts, so they've done a good job in terms of the setups of propane tanks. These tanks are certified for life, and then these will also have adequate crash protection around them as well to, again, preventatively just make sure that there be nothing that causes leaks as well.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? This is a public hearing. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to, has a comment? Okay. Let Susan go first.
Thank you. I'm Susan Tanner. I reside at 27 St. Andrews Way. I am at the Village at Meadowwood. I'm the president of the board, association board. On October 27th, after receiving the certified mail announcement from the gas company, I forwarded an email to all the members in our community, the 71 households, advising them, first of all, the public hearing, its purpose and intent, and then to give them the opportunity to, if they had any questions or further concerns, they could have them addressed by me. I would reach out to Mark Baranski or Tremolco. Apart from one response that just said, hey, it's a common practice, why are you even telling us this? There were no other comments. There are 2 other residents from our community here at the tonight, and they might have individual questions that they want to ask or address. But from my perspective, the community is in support of this. They understand the need and are in support.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and the gentleman there in the second row.
My name's Kenneth Kinross. I live at 8 St. Andrews Way in the same development. And I've worked around tanks for refueling automobiles and trucks with propane tanks. And the thing about propane is it goes down. It doesn't go up into the air. It goes down and it follows things. So if there's a spark, like a drain or something, and something's leaking slightly, and there's a spark in the drain, it's going to blow up the drain. I've seen that happen. I came from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and the Pittsburgh Press was the newspaper there, and they ran propane trucks, and delivery trucks and great big trucks. And they had a leak, and they weren't aware of it, and they weren't monitoring it very well. And it blew up part of the parking lot where the trucks were parked. They lost several trucks there at the same time. So my question is, they're talking about the propane dissipates. Yeah, the propane dissipates, and it dissipates down. Well, guess what's down there? Meadowwood is down that hill. So my question is, are they going to monitor that area? Or are they just going to say, well, it dissipates? Well, it might dissipate into my basement, because I'm not very far from there.
Okay, we'll ask him that question. Do you have any other questions?
That's all.
Okay. Do you want to address that question?
Absolutely, through the chair. So propane, they call it specific gravity. To make a long story short, propane is heavier than air when it first is distributed. So we certainly correct that. In theory, that's a part of the reason, and Chief could probably attest to it too, where when you're looking to install a tank off the side of a house, you need to have proper distances from a basement window or openings to a home. In those situations, it's 3 to 5 feet, depending on the municipality or the authority having jurisdiction. So at home residential propane tanks, the distance would be 3 to 5 feet. We're certainly well north of that in terms of distances from the residences, as Gashal had said. It's also something worth noting as well. In terms of combusting propane itself, it's not something that is just as easy as striking a match next to it. You need to have the specific gas to air ratio in order to allow for a combustion of the gas. With propane, just for raw numbers, it's about 2 to 9% with some decibels there. So meaning to say if there's less than 1% of propane in air, if you were to light a match, it's not going to explode. If it was over 9%, it's not going to either. So it has one of the more restrictive gas to air ratios than other fuels like natural gas. And in terms of, say, temporary heating, fuel sources that you could use despite propane. So their next alternative would be diesel, for example. Diesel, while it's not an explosive per se, it's definitely a lot dirtier of a fuel. If there was any sort of leak, that's when you need to worry about containment and certain things like that. And for what it's worth, it's a higher greenhouse gas emitter. much more so. I want to say closer to 20% north than propane. So certainly understand the gentleman's concern on that. And yes, it's one thing that we also do in terms of making sure that there's proper leak mitigation techniques in place. We do install tank monitors on our propane tank setups. So should there be an uncontrolled release where there is a leak of gas, it is something that we would be notified, and we would be notified the moment it happened. So myself, as well as the two owners, we get email alerts at all times of the night if, God forbid, something like that happened. In our 35 years in existence, we haven't had any explosion on any of our propane tank sites. We have over north of 12,000 customers servicing Connecticut, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, but no less. We definitely take it serious, and he's absolutely right to be asking questions like these. The thing we say with propane is it's a very safe fuel as long as you're being responsible with your practices and your installation. So it certainly would be something that we take first and foremost in terms of priority of safety and making sure that we have a closed system and no leaks in place. I hope that answers the question. I know it.
I was going to ask Chief Ryan if he had anything to add to that.
Thank you.
The only thing I would add is that I think we're on the site quite a bit. Not just us, the fire department, but also the plumbing inspector. So I think if there's an issue, certainly we'll have an opportunity to discuss it with them, to address it. We're on that property quite a bit. So I feel confident that this product will work.
Okay.
The system that we use.
And you feel like the safeguards they have in
Correct.
place are going to be sufficient?
Yes.
Okay. Virginia, do you have anything?
You may have answered part of my question, Chief. From the applicant's perspective or the town's perspective, sir, you mentioned the automatic monitoring system and you get alerted. Well, are there any manual inspections that go on while you're on site, or are you physically checking the scene and not waiting for some automatic sensor to go off?
Yeah, absolutely. So before any sort of start of service, we do need to make sure that we have a closed system, meaning we'll put on a test to make sure that if we put air in there, or we could use propane as the fuel source to check that pressure doesn't drop. A pressure drop would signify that gas is escaping somewhere along the line, and we would need to seal that up. That's actually part of generally the gas inspection process. So we would need to make sure that that is performed prior to any service taking place. From there, it is a situation where anytime you have an interruption in service, that is actually going to be a cause for less safe situations, because now you need to resume it and you need to stop, check everything. So generally speaking, once a propane system is going, it's not something you want to be shutting down and turn back on, though it sounds like that would be the safer practice. You're allowing for issues to happen. Maybe an igniter doesn't work, which is something you need.
That's not my question, sir.
Yep, I'm planning to answer. I just wanted to kind of explain the reason why we won't just shut it down every time we're there. But what we do is anytime we make a delivery, we do what's called a soap test. So soap is sprayed along the lines to make sure, and at the gas valves, at the service valve of the tank, to make sure that there's no leaks happening that would bubble, indicating that there is a leak there. So we do that. Generally speaking, though, just all I was meaning to say was that you don't want to intentionally cause interruptions in service, because that's what can cause unsafe situations. So we try to do anything we can that involves not shutting off the system. So the soap test would be a part of that as well.
Thank you.
Okay, this is still an open public hearing. If you'd like to come up to the microphone and make your comment.
My name's Ed Duffin. I live at 270 Princeton Street, and I'm here once again. I live right across the street from this project, unfortunately. And I never got a notice that there was even a meeting. Somebody else had to tell me that there was a meeting here tonight about this. My problem with this whole thing is that right at the end now we know we have to have propane tanks. Well, this project is so big that they probably knew somewhere along the line when they were building that they would be having to heat these buildings during the wintertime, because they have so many buildings going. I think they have 4 or 5. They knew somewhere along the line they were going to need heat to heat these buildings. Why initially didn't they come up with a plan to propose the possibility of having propane tanks installed later if they need them during the heating system? I mean, they're putting it up now. It's just going to get passed. I know the way this whole place works. It's going to get passed. You're not going to turn them down for propane. a lot of other projects that build houses and complexes that don't use propane. They bring in space heaters or whatever. But I don't see why all of a sudden now it's a big issue, when this should have came down. In the building plans, it's the possibility of putting in propane tanks a long time ago when they got to this point, because they knew they were going to have cold weather, and they knew some of those buildings were not going to be done in time. I don't know why they did that.
Okay.
They should have notified us.
We'll see if they can address your concerns. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I appreciate the question from Mr. Duffin. I can't speak to other projects that have gone on. I do know that, as Chief had mentioned, a lot of times if there is a setup that's requiring less than 2,000 gallons, it just won't come in front of the board. It would just go straight to inspection. So, again, without specific projects to look at to give any sort of reference to, I'd imagine that is a part of it, as well as there being the alternative sources for temporary heating, that being diesel. Again, however, diesel is a much dirtier fuel, and that does allow for a higher carbon emitter to be used in diesel fuel for that. And I believe, and I'm not an authority on this, but Chief, you may, I'm not sure if there's any sort of special fuels for diesel if it goes beyond 2,000, or it may just be diesel as one, I'm not.
If it goes beyond.
Yeah.
Like you said, if it goes beyond 2,000 gallons, so typically in town, propane is used. Propane is used on residential properties, propane is used for the Kinlock. We've used it quite a bit. It's just, this is a little different because it's the rapid pace of construction that's going on. But as he addressed, if we don't use propane beyond the 2, then he's gonna come back with something like diesel within a permitted amount. So then you'll have mixed fuels.
And my understanding is this is just temporary for several months, is that correct?
That's correct. In the license, it says till June.
Okay. Right, thank you. Go ahead.
So we're going to cover this winter. Is construction slated to go beyond, go into another winter with other buildings?
I'd allow Sean to answer.
And at which point I would assume you'd come back for a similar permit?
At this time, we are not anticipating going to the next winter with the propane.
Not anticipate?
No, we don't anticipate going there. Yeah.
And in fact, through the chair, we're moving at such a fast pace on site that we did have, as part of the application, to some smaller 120-gallon tanks for the townhouses that were being built. It's still there in the off chance that there's any sort of small delay or, God forbid, a cold snap comes in 2 days or so. But it would seem as though we're not going to need any propane over in that area because of the rapid pace with which it's being built. So we're doing everything we can, TCRs as well as us, in terms of making sure that all that we're using this propane for, both in time and gallons spent there, are as minimal as possible and going as quick as possible through this process.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, is there anybody else here that would like to address this application?
Hi, my name is Lydia Gervais. I live at 217 Princeton Street, and I'm also about this is developments going in my backyard. I've been in construction, worked in construction for like over 40 years. I've never dealt with something like this. I've called a few of my job supervisors, and they're like pretty surprised about this. I feel like us neighbors are getting almost punished for them going so fast. It's not our fault they're going so fast. And I've worked through the winter in these buildings and stuff, not their buildings, and it's cold, and we have heat, and not heat in the buildings, but we provide heat. I'm against this. The neighbors have put up with so much on this development, and this is just one more thing. They should have thought of this before and put in something before, and now I just feel like they're being sneaky about this. And you can protect it all you want, and look and this, and do your little bubble test and everything. Things could still happen, and I'm sure diesel is more expensive than the propane, and that's why they don't want to go that route. I don't know, I'm trying to think of everything I wanted to say here, but I'm just, there's a lot of neighbors living really like Meadowwood's really close, and I'm so glad that this gentleman brought that up because I didn't hear this gentleman, I'm sorry, I forgot your name.
That's okay, I'm Brian.
Brian. I didn't hear Brian bring it up, that, one of the things that the propane goes down, he kind of said dissipates into the air. So I'm so glad that you brought that up. I just feel like there's little things that are always hidden from us. Every time I come to these boards for different things, if you don't get all your I's and your T's dotted and crossed, you lose out. And I'm tired of losing out, for one. I know with my own gas grill, if that thing is leaking or on and I didn't shut it off and I go to start it, there's an explosion. I can't even imagine if there's a leak on these huge tanks. I just don't like the idea. They should have thought of this before. I feel like they're sneaking in on us. I know it's cold out there. I've worked in the cold myself out in this construction field, but there's other ways to do this instead of putting all these tanks in everywhere.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any comments?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Can I ask another question? On a job that was under the 2,000 gallon level where it's just permitted, would the propane normally be stored in a 1,000 gallon tank like these, or would it be stored in smaller tanks?
So it's advantageous to have two tanks. So like say 2,000 gallons worth of capacity. It'd be advantageous to have there be two 1,000 gallon tanks versus say one 2,000 gallon tank, just to surface ratio of the tanks to the air.
And you're going to be using 1,000 gallon tanks.
That's correct.
So the size of the tanks that you're using is the typical size that are used on even smaller projects?
Certainly
Or they
for
would only
this,
use 2,000?
it's more a level of the KW or the BTU load of the heaters themselves. So each tank size has a certain BTU load with which it can handle in terms of combusting quickly enough. So if you say for example, a generator or something, if the burn rate is too fast for say one tank, the gas won't leave the tank quick enough to keep up with that BTU load, the demand for it, so it can actually freeze the gas that's inside the tank. So by having the larger capacity tanks, that makes sure that it will adequately keep up with the BTU load. And the more surface area you have in terms of the tank around the air, the more it will keep the temperature at a better way for it to release quicker. I know that sounds wonky.
So the 1,000 gallon tanks are preferable.
It's certainly in this scale size for the heaters that are being used, yeah. And that's all part of how we do that sizing. It's part of NFPA, the National Fire Prevention. They have different certifications, for lack of a better word, in terms of or suggested sizes of propane tanks based on the BTU load, just in their practices and experiments through the past.
Okay.
Paul, could you scroll to page 9 of the application?
Thank you.
And through the chair, for what it's worth, too, the larger the tank size, the less deliveries we would need to make, too. So we're not, backing in and yet another large
I'm just curious
truck
from
over
a
there.
storage perspective. It's the same
Can we
if you have a
just one
smaller
person
job where
talk
you
at a
have
time?
where you have a 1,000 gallon tank
Okay,
here and a
let's-
1,000
let's-
gallon tank
that's
here.
okay.
If this is the same as having, they're just more of them spread out. So
Did you get your question?
yes, yeah, thank you.
So the first page of the application for the license, the opening section is to list the combustible liquids, solids, and gases by product name, class, quantity, and amount. Is it acceptable that this is blank?
So if you look, when we worked with the state, they said, because it's liquid propane, if you go to page 2, it's a special category for LP gas, and that's where it was supposed to be listed. So per the state, it was supposed to be listed under LP gas. I asked the same question.
I see it, yeah.
Yep.
Right there.
Did you have another question, Virginia? Okay. Pat, did you have a question?
I'm all set.
Okay. George? Okay, do we have any other questions on Zoom?
There's a public.
Say that again? No, I think he's just
No, there's
looking at
nobody
the...
else on Zoom, no.
Someone's raising their hand in the public.
Oh, if you want to come back up to the microphone.
Duffin, 270 Princeton. So they're so concerned about the tanks not leaking. How many heaters are actually inside these buildings that are heating the rooms? Anybody know?
There's going to be 2 heaters set up for building 3.
So these heaters could leak too. If you have a leak in one of these heaters inside the building's gone.
Well, by then the gas is combusted, so the gas would have already been combusted by, that's what's generating the heat. So there'd be
You
no
have to
gas
come
leak
to the
coming out.
microphone, sir.
Sorry.
I can't hear you.
Yeah, I
well.
just need to grab the mic. Mr. Duffin. It's a good question. So the heater itself won't leak because by that time the propane has combusted. That's what's created the heat, and it's the heat itself that's going into the building. if that
Okay,
makes
so
sense.
how come all these homes and neighborhoods blow up because their propane tanks blow up?
So
The heaters.
yeah, great question. So those are furnaces and boilers that have been installed in the home for permanent fixtures. These are temporary heaters that are outside, and that's where that primary part is happening, and then we're bringing the heat into the buildings.
But they can fail.
By
Yes or
fail,
no?
I'm not sure.
If they could cause an explosion?
Well, no, I mean, the explosion would be from an abundance of gas accumulating in
That's
like
right.
a leak scenario.
Exactly. So you could have a leak inside the building and a spark from somebody using a hand tool that could generate explosions inside the building.
So the gas is all being stored external. It's a little bit different than a permanent heat setup because, again, we have in those situations, you have the furnaces and the boilers and hot water heaters installed inside. So in terms of that, but again, to that point, if there was any leak, that would all be diagnosed through the pressure checks that we do prior to getting inspection. Those would if something like that were occurring, we would identify that through the pressure checks that we do.
I hope so. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So Paul, you said there was nobody on Zoom?
No.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? Okay. Any thoughts? Do we want to take a vote on this evening? Is there any more questions that we need?
I'll give a couple of thoughts on this.
Well, first, if you're going to give thoughts on it, we have to close the hearing if we're not going to take any more testimony. And then we can just debate it.
Okay.
So are we ready to do that? Go ahead.
I guess if your question, one of your questions though was, do we decide tonight, or is there more information we need? And if there's more information we need, then we would want to extend the public hearing, not
Correct.
close it.
Correct. So that's what I'm saying, but then we can't debate it tonight. If we don't close the public hearing, we cannot debate it. We cannot discuss it until the public hearing is closed. That's the way it works.
Okay.
As town council, he's on.
Okay. I guess the one question I would have remaining then is I forgot town council was on, if they have anything to add. We asked chief.
We can ask him, Paul, since he's here.
Brian, do you have anything to add to the board this evening for what you've heard?
Well, if you can hear me all right?
Yes.
Yeah, I would agree with the chair. I mean, that's the point of the hearing, is to receive information, testimony, documents, et cetera. Once you close the hearing and you're talking about whether to grant the application or not, no new information is supposed to come in. It's supposed to be based on what you got through the hearing.
My question wasn't procedural. My question was, is there anything that you want to add that we should be aware of in our approval or disapproval for this license?
Oh, I see. No, I think, I think you've heard what you've needed to hear. And I think the chief filled in any gaps that there might have been.
Okay, thank you. So I'll take a motion to close, and if we don't have enough votes to close the public hearing, then we won't close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, 5-0. Okay, now you can give your opinions. So we'll start with you, Pat.
I'm happy to approve this. I'm in the business. I understand the safety mechanisms that goes into it. I believe the heating equipment is probably going to sit outside, and you're going to be ducting the heat into the building, so it will protect the people inside the building. Propane is much safer than diesel fumes for workers and such. this is a common practice, but for the amount of tanks that'll be there. So I don't see this as an unsafe initiative. Once schedules get developed, this brings you to the point where you realize that you need so much gas to take care of so much building space as you're moving through the process. So I have no problem with this, and I have no doubt that the powers that be will make sure that this is a safe initiative. So.
Okay, anybody else? Virginia? No. Aaron? George?
No, I think, everybody always has some concern, but rightly so, but I think that the gentleman did a great presentation, and I think the fire chief is comfortable with it, so.
Right, and I put a lot of stock in the fire chief's, opinion too, that, they're gonna be out there and they're gonna be monitoring it, so.
Right, I think if we have the checks and balances between both the applicant and our own fire department.
In addition to fire, your building department, plumbing inspectors, electrical inspectors are constantly there, and I'm sure if anybody gets any sniff of anything, it's going to be brought up quickly.
So we'll take a motion.
I will make a motion to approve the application of CHMF BTH the Third Boston Chelmsford LLC for a license for storage of flammables, combustibles, or explosives on the premises at 255 Princeton Street, as presented.
Madam Chair, if you could amend that, or extend that motion, just looking to include a June 30th, 2025 expiration date.
I was going to ask that.
Okay, I just want to make sure, because I'm just catching notes here from, that basically, it's that way you don't have to hold a revocation hearing.
If you,
Okay.
Paul, let's just, if you scroll to where it says the date, I thought I saw June 30th, 2025.
Yeah,
To
it's at the
expire.
end of page 2. Temporary storage expires on June 30th, 2025.
Okay.
Right under Chief Ryan's signature.
Okay. So make sure
See
the motion-
keep going up, right there. Under Chief Ryan, it's typed in, temporary storage of LP gas license expires
Okay.
on June 30th.
Just want to make sure your motion had that as well, so we don't have
Would
to.
you like me to add it?
Sure.
I'll make a motion to approve the application of CHMF BTH the Third Boston Chelmsford LLC for a license of storage of flammables, combustibles, or explosives on the premises at 255 Princeton Street to expire June 30th, 2025, as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
5-0. Okay, thank you for coming in.
Thank you for the time, all, and for allowing me to answer the questions to the public as well. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Okay, so next up, we have several licenses that have been in effect for the same type of flammables or inflammables. So I don't know who wants to lead the discussion on this, Paul, if it's going to be Brian Riley or Christina, or somebody can tell, do a better presentation than I can about why we're here. on
Right,
this.
Christina's there on the line with council. Basically, and Christina's sort of been, leading this effort of basically cleaning up the town's licenses and working with the fire chief and so forth. I think the way it's envisioned is you would go through each one individually in order to revoke the storage permit, because this is the type of permit that runs with the land. And as they were reviewing the materials, they saw some of these were quite dated and not in use. And what we're looking at here is basically a revocation for the non-use of the license. That wouldn't prevent in the future, if somebody wanted to come at this or any other location, much as we saw this evening, that somebody could come in with a request for the license. But the problem is we've got licenses that are out there being renewed that just aren't in existence, and it creates confusion both for the town, for record keeping and so forth. It also creates some questions whether there's underground tank removal and so forth. So the goal here is to basically, revoke these licenses so that we can basically have our slate clean in the office and for the town records. Because they do, as I said, they do come up in searches, and some of these, Christina went back into the the record storage area to gather information on these materials. Christina, is there anything you want to add to that this evening?
No, I think you've, sorry, I don't have my camera on here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I think you've covered it. It just came to our attention that some of these licenses have had, that have not been in use for sometimes decades, where tanks were maybe removed in the 80s. And where this type of license is unique in that it runs with the land as opposed to with the licensee. Some of these are quite old. Some of these may have been issued in the 50s and 60s. If the license is not revoked, and council can speak to this as well, if they wanted to put a new tank in, as long as it didn't exceed the parameters that were on their original license, they would need a permit from the fire department to install a tank, but they wouldn't need to come back before the board. So I believe it's in the board's best interest to revoke any of these licenses that are not active. And then these property owners, if they wanted to install tanks at any time in the future, could come back and apply for a new license as you just had in the previous item.
I'm happy to add a little bit more if you would like, Madam Chair.
Sure.
And that is, as Christina said, this is an unusual kind of license, and most of the licenses this board deals with are ones where people have to come back and renew it every year, like a liquor license. This one doesn't. You issue it, and as long as it's being exercised, your license continues. It runs with the land. All you have to do is file this annual certification with the town clerk's office to say, I still have this license. It's not entirely clear in the statute itself, Chapter 148, Section 13. It doesn't literally say you have to keep exercising this license or you might lose it. But the inference by having to report to the town every year saying, I still have this license, I still have these tanks, that you're supposed to be exercising it. And you may have seen the guide from the Department of Fire Services that was part of the materials, which says very clearly a couple of times, the state says that's the point of this annual certification, is to say, I still have this tank, I'm still using it, and you still have my name if you need it for any reason. These all appear to have been taken out decades ago, these tanks. And so there's really no reason for these licenses to keep carrying on for the reasons Christina just said. But the statute says that it continues unless it's revoked for cause. And if you don't have the tanks anymore, you're not exercising the license, that's plenty of cause, in my opinion. So just to kind of close the loop on all these and not have licenses hanging out there wondering whether they're valid or not, we recommended that you hold this hearing, particularly if nobody's here on behalf of the property owner. You can be pretty short and sweet on it because the ground is that the license is not being exercised, and as a result, the board has authority to revoke it. And as Paul said, if they have reason in the future to want to put a tank in, they can come back and get a new license.
Okay, thank you. Is Chief still back there?
Yeah.
Yes. Could you give your thoughts on this?
Good evening again. So what kind of brought this, I know Christina touched on this, many months ago, Maria Vasquez, when she was reaching out to do the annual renewal, she reached out to me to get a contact for one of the properties, and then I notified her that that property no longer has tanks, and I think it was time to get a legal opinion. And then I think the board was in the process of reviewing legal counsel. When KP Law came on, that's when we approached them to look at this issue, and we're certainly in favor of it. I think, as Christina and as the attorney said, if they're not exercising it, I feel that they shouldn't be using a license, shouldn't be renewing it, certainly shouldn't be paying for it, because if they don't use it, and in one case where we had somebody just buy the property, they could just come in, get a permit from us, but they would already have the license. I think they should have to come before the board, go through the process like we just did for 255, if they want to get a license. But if they're not using it, they're not exercising it, then I think it should be revoked. So
Okay.
the 31 we have right now, I think you got 6 or 7 before you. And there is still one more that is hanging out there, just want to be up front. There's a property that just sold, but we need to get in that building. We have not had the chance yet. So there's still one more out there.
Should the ones that continue to stay in effect, should they be checked, like every year inspected, like every lot of
So if
other
it's a
things that-
permit, most of your gas stations, yes, we're there, because we issue the permits.
Right.
So we issue them, we're on site, we do the inspection.
These aren't all gas stations though, right? There's
They're
some-
not.
So the ones that aren't in gas stations, should they be inspected as well? or-
Yeah, so a good example would be Thermo Fisher, who has a license, came before you. We do inspections there, because if they have a license, like 255 Princess Street, they also need a permit. So a lot of these, you need both. So we're involved with that.
Chief Ryan,
Just a thought.
so we know that 100% of these properties no longer have the tanks.
That is correct. If there's a
So
tank,
if we revoke the licenses, there's no follow-up enforcement that needs to happen. It's not that there's an unused tank, it's that there is no tank.
correct. If we knew there was, and this has happened in the past, if there is a tank in the ground, it's called abandoned. And I think that the attorney touched on is a certain period of time that you give them before it's not exercised. We have actually acted on that, used town council to have those tanks removed. We do not want tanks in the ground,
Right.
above ground, not being used.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we will take these one at a time and see if there's anybody that is present either here on Zoom that wants to speak to them, any of the owners. So the first one is 1 Ward Way, Joseph Ravad. It's the situation that the chief has just mentioned, that that we wish to revoke this license for non-use, for abandonment, I guess you could say. So any questions? This is not a public hearing, so we don't have to open it to the public, but if the property owner is here and wants to speak, they can. I don't see anybody here from Joseph Ravad.
No one on Zoom.
Okay. So we can just go right to a motion to revoke this license.
I will make a motion to revoke the flammable storage license for 1 Ward Way.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. All right, next.
Madam Chair, if I may, I just wanted to add that, we will want to send each of these parties a letter, short letter, saying that the board has taken this vote today to revoke their license. But I think what you just did with 1 Ward Way, fills all that you need to do.
Okay, because I noticed that they did send a certified letter to each property telling them about this meeting tonight, so.
That's correct.
So they should know about it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so the next one is 23 Progress Avenue in Chelmsford. Anybody here for that property? And I take it there's nobody on Zoom for that one. Alyssa Weiss or something, okay? So we'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion to revoke the flammable storage license for 23 Progress Avenue.
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. All right, next we have 30 Central Square. Any questions or comments about this one? No, we'll take a motion.
I will make a motion to revoke the flammable storage license for 30 Central Square.
Second.
There a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, 57 Ledge Road. Any questions, comments? Apparently not. We'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion to revoke the flammable storage license for 57 Ledge Road.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. 99 Littleton Road in Chelmsford. Any questions, comments? Okay, we'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion to revoke the flammable storage license for 99 Littleton Road.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and 100 Watton Street in North Chelmsford. Any comments? Anybody have any comments, concerns? Okay, take a motion.
I'll make a motion to revoke the flammable storage license for 100 Watton Street.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
And lastly, 374 North Road. Anybody have any questions, comments? I'll take a motion.
I will make a motion to revoke the flammable storage license for 374 North Road.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Christine.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll circle back with Christine about getting the written decisions out in the mail.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, we have another public hearing. This is our annual tax classification public hearing. And I just want to go through the process that we'll follow for this as the practice that we usually follow every year. We'll have a presentation by the assessors, followed by questions from the board about the information that's presented. Then, since this is a public hearing, we'll allow questions and input from the public. After we receive all the comments today, we will continue this public hearing until our November 18th meeting, at which time the public hearing will be continued. We will possibly receive more information based on any questions that may come up. We also may receive more public comment. We will then close the public hearing, and at that time, we will take a vote on take the necessary votes on setting the tax rate. So to kick it off, the Chair of the Board of Assessors, Sam Chase. It's all yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, and Town Manager Cohen. For the record, I'm Sam Chase, Board of Assessors Chair, representing the board at this hearing. Now, before we get into the meat of our presentation, I'd like to take a few moments to give you and the community some information about assessors in general, and also to let you know about the personnel changes that the board and office had during this past year. The town manager appoints assessors for a 3-year term. Current board members are Sam Chase, Mike Donahue, and Harrison Mayotte. The town manager also appoints the chief assessor, who manages day-to-day assessing operations. All board members and the chief assessor have to meet the minimum qualification standards established by the Department of Revenue, as specified in Mass General Law, Chapter 59, Section 21B. To qualify as assessors, board members must complete basic courses of training and then pass a Department of Revenue administered exam within 1 year following their appointment. This requirement assures both the Department of Revenue and the public that board members are proficient in the application of Massachusetts assessment law and that they are qualified to assess all real and personal property within the town. After serving a combined total of 33 years, assessors Kevin Sullivan and Jack Duffett chose to retire this past year. Their service and willingness to share their professional knowledge benefited the town immeasurably. We're thankful for their many years of dedicated service. Our new members are Mike Donahue and Harrison Mayotte. Mike retired as deputy chief after serving more than 30 years in the Chelmsford Fire Department. Harrison is well known for his service in the town clerk's office, and we do look forward to their contributions. We had a 75% turnover in office staff this year. Assistant Assessor Rena Gagne left us to become Leominster's chief assessor. Rena's calm and consistent approach to her job contributed greatly to office operations, and she'll be missed. Chief Assessor Frank Green. Frank retired in July after 23 years of faithful and conscientious service. Drawing on his working background in construction and appraisal science, Frank brought the town's assessing operations to their current levels of technical and administrative professionalism. It was my distinct privilege to serve with Frank for over 15 years, and I'm grateful for his leadership, which included a willingness to mentor board members in the ways of mass appraisal and assessment technique. The town will miss his professionalism and technical skills. Sue Taylor, assistant to the chief assessor, retired in September after many years of dedicated town service, first with the school department and then with our office. Sue's work ethic and ability to manage daily administrative and customer service demands effectively contributed to the smooth running of our department. We'll miss her upbeat style and sense of humor. Earlier this year, Ms. Reagan Flood joined us as assistant assessor. When Frank retired, she became our chief assessor. Reagan worked many years in the Lowell assessor's office, and that experience will serve her well in her new Chelmsford role. When Sue retired, Michelle O'Hagan was promoted to the assistant to the assessor's position, and along with replacement hires, Assistant Assessor Brian Cochran and Principal Clerk Monica Walsh, our office staff and board are now at their fully functional budgeted operational levels. Now, let's take a moment to review how we assess Chelmsford property. Our process follows American Appraisal Institute standards and is regulated by Massachusetts law. Residential properties are valued using the cost and sales review methods together. Commercial properties are valued using cost, sales, and income capitalization methods together. The results are then checked using standardized statistical testing methods to arrive at a market value for a specific property type. The Massachusetts Department of Revenue reviews the assessor's work and must certify that all real estate values meet the legal standard of being at full and fair cash value before a uniform tax rate can be finalized. Now, if residents would like a more detailed description of the assessment process, they can read the assessor's report in the fiscal 2024 annual town report on pages 31 through 34. Assessors do not set the property tax rate. We calculate a uniform tax rate by dividing the total tax levy by the certified value of all real and personal property subject to taxation. Then, the Select Board decides whether that uniform rate will apply or whether commercial and residential properties will be taxed at different rates, which is the so-called classified or split tax rate approach. Tonight's public hearing is the beginning of that process. Depending on economic conditions, residential and commercial property values may increase or decrease at different rates annually, resulting in a natural tax shift over time from one property class to the other. To allow communities to compensate for rising residential versus flat commercial property values, the state authorized the split rate system by way of a 1978 Constitution amendment, state constitution, but they gave no guidance as to how it should be implemented. Instead, they left that decision up to local select boards and city councils. Currently, about 1/3 of Massachusetts cities and towns split the rate. There seems to be no consistent reason why some cities and towns choose to split while others do not. A few towns try to stabilize residential and commercial industrial levy shares to a predetermined fixed percentage. Littleton, Maynard, and Tewksbury have consistently used that approach. Some resort or summer towns assume that the commercial property class uses municipal services more than the residential class does, so they use that logic to provide tax relief to their residential taxpayers. Nantucket and Rockport have provided that explanation in the past. After conducting a comprehensive study in 2004 on the effects of split-rate taxation, the Massachusetts Department of Revenue concluded that most communities that split the tax rate do so primarily to provide tax relief to residential taxpayers, and they provide no other explanation. A few cities and towns do, however, speak frankly about the political nature of classification. When asked by the news media about why they adopt a split rate, they answer that they do it only to give residential taxpayers the lowest possible tax bill. Both Lowell and Bill Ricca have provided this explanation in the recent past. Now, on to our presentation. It is designed, hopefully, to make it easy for you to see how various rate and exemption options can impact property taxpayers. You can also see how Chelmsford's property tax compares with other towns in our area, and how we rank tax burden-wise with all Massachusetts cities and towns. Hopefully, this information will help you to reach an informed decision. Now, on behalf of our board, I do want to express our gratitude to our new chief assessor and her very capable staff for the outstanding work that they do to ensure that residents are treated fairly and courteously. Residents who have questions concerning property valuations should feel comfortable contacting the assessor's office at 978-250-5220. The staff is always available to assist you. Okay. So we can, thank you, move to the second slide. So here we are, as the chair said, every year we have to do this. And why? Why do we do this? Because state law requires that the select board have a tax classification hearing every year. Reason is twofold. Number one, you need information to help you make the decision. And secondly, you have to provide a public forum for discussion where members of the public can come speak to you about their feelings on whether or not you should split the tax rate. Next slide, please. So within this presentation, we will describe for you the tax policy options that are available to you. As I said before, hopefully you'll have all the information necessary to make the decision. And lastly, and perhaps most importantly, the last 3 slides of this presentation will give you the shift tables from 1 to 150 so that you can see the impact of various shift levels on the average property tax bills. So we're going to talk about all 5 classes of property, and we're also going to just touch briefly upon some of our methodology and give you some historical data and information. And as I said before, you will get to see the various effects of different split levels for the on the average taxpayer. So what you must do under state law, you have to take affirmative votes in the areas that are shown on this slide. So you have to make a decision on what you're going to do in all of these areas, and then you have to vote accordingly. So let's talk a little bit about the split rate itself and how we get there. The state law allows a municipality to shift up to 50% if at least 65 of the tax levy on a unified rate basis comes from the residential class. So if you're a community and your residential class contributes less than 65%, you cannot shift at the 150 maximum. You are able to shift at lower percentages. And there may be, although I've looked very hard and haven't found one, there may be a community out there that can't shift at all, but I don't think there is. I've looked. But there are some that cannot shift to the 150 because of where their residential levy is. So that's the minimum criteria for doing the shift. Then what happens is the select board looks at all the data that's available, and they have to adopt a residential factor that determines the level of shift. The residential factor cannot be less than the minimum residential factor that is calculated by the Department of Revenue. So the Department of Revenue takes in all of our data. We supply sales data, we supply valuation data, we supply budget data via a tax recapitulation sheet, what our projections are, what we think our receipts are going to be, what we think our assessments are going to be, so on and so forth, and a lot of other data. They calculate the minimum residential factor, which represents the percentage of the tax levy that must be paid by the residential class. That's what the minimum residential factor is. And you can't go below it. And for us, that would equate to a 150 shift, okay? So the residential factor, again, determines how much of a percentage of the tax levy each class pays. You can go to the next slide, okay? If you adopt a residential factor of 1, then that results in taxation of all property at the same rate, the so-called single or unified rate. Adopting a residential factor less than 1 results in increasingly greater tax burden shift from residential to the CIP classes. Next slide. Let's now talk about the exemptions and discounts that are available to you. Now, we'll start with the small commercial exemption because this board has consistently adopted that since the implementation of the first shift, which I believe was in fiscal year 2019. So in order to qualify for the small commercial exemption, the parcel under consideration must be valued at less than $1 million. Then all of the tenant businesses that are on that leased parcel can have no more than 10 employees per company, not per office on the parcel, but per company. So if I own a piece of commercial property, it's worth $950,000, and I have 3 tenant offices on my property, and one of the offices has 2 employees, we have to look at the company that those employees work for and figure out how many employees in the whole company. If it's more than 10, the parcel doesn't qualify. Okay, so that's the gating factor there. We get that information from the Department of Unemployment Assistance. They send us a list every year. And if you do grant the small commercial exemption, it shifts the tax burden to all of the non-exempted commercial and industrial properties. Next slide. This is just a very quick example of how it works. And the small commercial exemption is very, very simple to calculate, unlike the residential exemption, which we'll talk about in a minute, is a little bit more complicated. But the small commercial exemption, if the select board, as you have in the past, you adopt a 10% small commercial exemption, very simple. The qualifying property gets to subtract 10% from their tax bill. So if I own a commercial property that qualifies for the exemption and my tax bill is $20,000, I get to take $2,000 off that. My bill is now $18,000. That $2,000 gets shifted over to the balance of commercial and industrial properties that do not qualify for the exemption. So it's a shift within the class, okay? It's important to know that the owner of the parcel would receive the exemption, not the eligible businesses. It's whoever pays the tax on the property, which is the owner. Now, businesses may get the benefit of that depending on their lease arrangement with the landlord. They may get the benefit. They may not. It all depends, and we really don't have a way of knowing. Let's talk a little bit about the residential exemption, which, as far as I can determine, this town has never granted a residential exemption. This is a little bit more complicated to calculate and to apply. So in order to be eligible for the residential exemption, it has to be a principal residence property. So the taxpayer, that has to be their principal legal residence to qualify. And the amount of the exemption is up to 35% of the average assessed value of all residential class properties, not the average single-family value, the average of all residences. So that would be somewhat lower than the average single-family because you have condos and so forth mixed into that. Next slide, please. So the residential exemption shifts the tax burden from lower to higher valued homes and to those owned by non-residents. The residential exemption can't exceed 35% of the average assessed value of all Class 1. So the way that works is that calculation is made by the assessors. and those homes that fall somewhat below the median of the average assessed values would be eligible. And let's say you granted a 35% exemption. 35% of that median value would be deducted from the valuation of all the homes that were eligible. And that is a shift within the residential class, and that would change the tax rate. The tax rate would then go up within the residential class, and that number would be applied to those, to all of the residential class. But the ones that receive the exemption would pay the tax on a lower value because that value had been exempted. So it's a little bit more complicated than just taking 10% off your tax bill. I mean, you have to go through a fairly extensive calculation to do it. So that's how that works. Next slide would be open space discount. You have to take a look at this. What is open space? It's unimproved land. Unimproved land means not built on. Raw land. No man-made fixtures have been placed on there, houses, pavement, anything. Raw land. So you can, if you want to, you can exempt up to 25% of the value of that land that is classified as open space. And again, that would be, if you did that, that would be a shift within the residential class. Okay? So my guess is that one reason probably boards and neither of these exemptions, residential and open space, are typically granted. Very, very seldom. I know Westford did open space a few years ago, but they eliminated it, okay? And the problem with granting these exemptions within our demographic is it results in a higher tax bill for your residential taxpayer. If you're above that median value and you grant either or both of these exemptions, your residential taxpayer's tax bill is going to go up by quite a bit. So I would guess that's probably why the board doesn't adopt those two. Next slide. As per your annual tax review policy, we're required to present to you a summary of abatement requests and also the percentage return on commercial property owner income and expense statements, so you have the numbers there. And what's notable here, if you just look at the 2024 entry, we have about 10,500 residential properties of single family and condos, and we got 43 requests for abatement. Interesting. Not a lot to talk about. You think the number would be higher, but it's low. Same thing with commercial. We have roughly 402 parcels, and we get 27 requests. That's low. Now, the income and expense forms are required under state law. The owners of commercial properties have to submit to the Board of Assessors every year an income and expense statement, which is exactly what it says. It's a list of their sources of income and their expenses. And what the assessors do is they use these forms, they pool them together, and they use them in aggregate to determine a baseline of what the market is for commercial rents and expenses. What we don't do, and this is a very common misconception, and I understand why people would think this, but what we don't do is we don't take an individual income and expense statement and peg that to an individual property and calculate its value. That's not what we do. That information is pooled and it establishes the market, okay? So you can see that this past year, we had a return compliance rate of about 46%. Like to get 100%, but it never happens. 46%. Statewide average return rate is 28.5%, so we're doing a fairly good job of getting those back. Next slide. This is simply historical information that the board has asked for in years past, and what it does is it shows you what the comparison is between the average single-family tax bill in Chelmsford to 10 surrounding communities. Either these are contiguous or near contiguous communities. And if you go to the last line, the entry 2024, and the first column, Chelmsford, you'll see that last year, the average single-family tax bill was $8,564. You read that line all the way across, and you will see what the average single-family tax bills were in fiscal 2024 for all of the comparator towns. So Tewksbury, Dracut, Billerica, Tingsboro, and Lowell all have lower average single-family tax bills than Chelmsford does. The towns of Westford, Carlisle, Littleton, Acton, and Bedford all have higher single-family tax bills, so that means we're right in the middle. There's 10 towns that we compare ourselves to, we're right in the middle in terms of our average single-family tax bill.
Excuse me, Sam?
Yes, go ahead.
Just so I understand, the percentage column is the percentage increase from the previous year? Is that what that is?
No,
Or
no,
what is the
average, good question. Average annual percentage increase, that is taking all of the percentages going back to 2011 and averaging them. So if you look at Chelmsford, what that says is the average year-over-year increase is 3.6%. Okay?
That's what I mean. So if I go from 2011 to 2012, and so 2011 says 3%, so that means it was a 3% increase over 2010?
Correct,
Thank
correct.
you.
Okay. Next slide. This is simply the state rank, and this shows you where we rank statewide with the single-family tax bill. Not so good as we do with our neighboring towns, but we're number 78th in the state, which means obviously that 77 cities and towns have a higher bill and 243 have a lower bill. Next slide. This is a new slide that I included this year because I think it's good information to have, because people ask the question, well, where do you get the market data from? Well, sales is one component of the market. We do, as I said in my opening remarks, we do a lot more than look at just sales, but that is a major component. So what we do is we aggregate property sales, and we do send them into the Department of Revenue. They take a look at it, and they make sure that, the statistics are correct and so forth. And what is required in order to have a basic market basis is we have to have a minimum of 2% of adjusted sales to justify a market in a subcategory of a property class. So if you look at this slide, and you look at the extreme left, and then you look at the first column under 101, which is single family, you can see that we had 9,064 parcels of single family, and we had sales of 240 in the sales period that you see at the top of the slide where it says basis. So we're looking back almost 2 years. So the market sales basis for the fiscal 25 year is in fact the time frame you see there, okay? So we had 240 sales, but we only had 190 sales that were arm's length or properly adjusted to the market parameters. So 50 of those sales fell out. So they weren't arm's length sales, they might have been short sales, they might have been foreclosure sales, they might have been property speculative sales. There's all kinds of reasons why those would fall out and not qualify under the basic market parameter. So you come down to 190 adjusted sales, and then the number below it is the percentage of the adjusted sales that we have to use as a basis for the market, and we just made it on single family, 2.1%. Which is why they went back. Normally, the evaluation period is 16 months. We had to go back almost 23 and a half months to grab enough qualified sales. And the DOR likes you to stick to 16 months if you can, but it's very, very common that you have to expand that period. So we had to do it. Although in the other property classes, you can see we didn't have that problem. We had sufficient adjusted arm's length sales to qualify and meet those percentages. The line under the adjusted sales line is the median assessment to sales ratio. And what that means is that's where you are with respect to 100% market pegged valuation. So the ideal is all your properties want to be at 100% of the market value. That really isn't possible for a whole host of reasons. The Department of Revenue gives you a plus or a minus 10% variance. So you can be as low as 90% in your sub-property class. You can be as high as 110%. I've been doing this for 16 years, and I don't think I've ever seen numbers much higher than mid-90s. Occasionally, depending on your economic circumstances on your commercial properties, you may get some higher numbers there. But typically, where you want to be for residential is between 91 and 95. That's where you want to be, and that's where we are, okay? For commercial, you want to be between 92 and 96, and we're just at the bottom of that, but we meet the criteria. The COD, which is just a measurement, is a coefficient of dispersion. What that is a measure of assessment projection uniformity around the median. So it's just a statistical way of checking the accuracy of your calculations. Next slide, please. This is very simply just a listing of assessed value growth by property class. So we go back 5 years, and you can see what that is. If you look over on the extreme right, you see the percentage change. To Selectman Timmons's point, that is succeeding year over succeeding year, okay? So we've been used to rather high property value appreciation over the last 3 or 4 years. What we saw this year for 2025 is we saw a relative flatness. So we went from increase 2023 to 2024, all property classes of 8.9% value. This year, it's 1.9. So I'm a suspicious guy, all right? So when I saw those numbers, I thought, well, we better investigate this a little further. So we checked back with the DOR. We made sure we had our numbers right. They said that was fine. We also checked with Vision Appraisal, who is our valuation consultant. He gave us some very good information, and he essentially confirmed this. I also called assessors in 4 of our surrounding towns, and they were seeing the same thing. So we felt very, very comfortable after doing those inquiries that these numbers are accurate, and of course the DOR has certified them, so they've looked at them too. So we feel comfortable that that's accurate information and is reflective of the market. Now, the next slide is a new slide that I included this year. I think this is important, and it's good information for you folks, because you may get inquiries from your constituents. Essentially, we're breaking down the subcategories within the residential class. So you can see what those numbers are, and the way to read this slide is taking the first line, single family, you move over to the right, and percent res is the percentage of residential value that particular subclass occupies. So this says that 78% of the residential real estate value in town is in fact single family. If you go over to the next column, that's the percentage of total assessed value. So 66% of the total assessed value in town is made up of single family residents, and then so on down. So that's how you read that slide. Next share. Don't worry, folks, we're almost there. Okay, your policy also requires that we provide a history of levy share relationship. So what you see, starting in 2020, going up to 2025, you see that in that time period, we've had roughly a 2.4% value shift from the commercial, industrial, and personal to the residential. Now, this is pre-split tax rate, okay? This is just the raw data. And this is a result of the natural economic condition that we talked about when I first stood up here and explained that, you get natural occurring shifts. It can go the other way, and 15 or 20 years ago, it did go the other way, where you lost residential value share and it moved over to commercial. But we haven't seen that now for about 12 years. Next slide. Okay. So we're getting to the point now where we want to talk about the possibilities of the shift. So the starting point has to be the single tax rate. So we have to calculate that. So what we do is we take the prior year's levy limit, not the prior year's total levy, the prior year's levy limit, and state law allows us to add 2.5% to that number, which we do. Then we also add our certified new growth, okay? Now, that's a number that takes a little while to put together because essentially it's building permits and it's square footage. It's not value appreciation. It's essentially new construction and square footage, the value. That number is sent to the Department of Revenue along with all of our other information. They come and they perform some additional calculations. They come back and they tell us whether that's a good number or not, and they have, and it is, and it's certified. So we know that that number is valid. Incidentally, I'm going to anticipate a question. For this period, about 43% of the new growth comes from the residential class. Okay, just so that you know that. You add those numbers together and you get the fiscal 25 levy limit, and then to that you also can add your excluded debt. So you add those numbers together and then you get the total allowed levy. Okay? If you compare that number to last year's total allowed levy, it represents a 3.3% increase. And I think that's what causes some confusion with taxpayers, because what they hear is you can only go up 2.5%. Well, that's not right. You can go up 2.5% plus new growth plus excluded debt. So that's the reason behind that. To get the single tax rate, it's just a very simple mathematical calculation. You take the total allowed levy for 25, you divide it by the total assessed value in the town, and you multiply that number by 1,000, and you get your single tax rate. So the takeaway, leading into the next slide, and what I'm going to ask you to do, Paul, is skip to slide 23. So skip the first, okay, yeah, get the last one. There you go. All right. Department of Revenue calculated minimum residential factor is 91.169. We talked about that before. That number represents the amount of the levy that the DOR tells us has to come from the residential class, okay? 91.169%. That's a calculated number. So
Excuse me, Paul, I think you're...
go ahead.
You wanted slide 23 up there, right? Yeah, that one.
I want, actually, 23, that's correct. Thank you. So the reason, and then I'll have you go back in a minute. The reason we start there is because I want to tie this into the minimum residential factor. If you go to the bottom of this slide, you look over on the extreme left, and you see your levy shift at 150. You follow that all the way over to the column with the red numbers. Well, lo and behold, 0.91169. That is the minimum residential factor that is calculated by the Department of Revenue. So when we develop the shift tables, a lot of work, I can tell you. We develop the shift tables, you start with that number and you work back. Okay, that's how you do it. Now, Paul, you can go back to the first slide. All right. So this year, I'm sorry I had to add a couple slides here, but last year, for some reason, we squeezed all this on one page. I couldn't read it, so I broke it into two pieces of paper. I think it's a little easier to read. It is for me, anyway. So this, very quickly, how do we read this? Start in the upper left, where it says levy shift 1. You follow that all the way across, where it says rate res, rate com, and so forth. You see 1434. That is your single tax rate. You follow that across to the tax, res tax. If we were at a single tax rate for fiscal 25, the average residential tax would be $9,097. Move over to the right again under commercial tax. If you were to adopt that position, the average commercial tax bill would be $19,473, and you just read down at various shift levels to see what the impact. Let's skip down to the row of 120, because that's where you are now and you've been for the last several years. Let's read across to the residential rate. If you stay with the 120, your tax rate for residential will be $1,383 versus the $1,434. Your tax rate for commercial and industrial will be $1,720 versus the $1,434. And you can read that across and you can see what the tax bills would be and the savings in the case of the residential and the increase in the case of the commercial. Okay? So that's how you read these tables. It's very simple. And when you make your motion, wherever you want to go, you make your motion in the form of adopting a residential factor, because that's what the Department of Revenue requires. Now, Paul, you can skip forward to the last slide. Again, this is this is a brand-new slide, never had this before. But we thought it might be interesting for you, and I know you can go back, you're all very intelligent people, you could do this calculation yourself. but I thought it would be just interesting to take a snapshot. And what we're doing here with this slide is we're showing you at the current shift level of 120, which is where we are, what would the average tax bill increase be versus what was paid last year. So that's all this slide is doing. Okay, so we start at the bottom with the 120, and you can see those numbers. So based on an average residential single-family tax bill last year of $85.64, if you stayed with the 120 shift, your tax bill would be $8,776, and that would represent a $212 increase over last year, or 2.5%. Okay, now the reason we went back up to the 1 is because when we're doing these kinds of calculations, our points are the single-family tax bill and where we are now. So I wanted to give you that shift. If you wanted to go in the other direction, you could easily go back to your other two slides, and you could make those determinations quite easily. So, but I thought this might be a kind of an interesting way to display that data. You can quickly see where we were last year and where we are this year if you take on the 120 shift. So that is the basis of the presentation. I'll be very happy to answer any questions the board has. If we can't answer the question, we'll take the question, and we'll get you an answer and come back in 2 weeks.
Okay, any questions for Sam? Sure.
Thank you for the presentation.
Oh, you're very welcome.
I don't know if my question is answered on slide 20 or if I'm asking something different, but do we know by what percentage on average residential property values have increased since last year, and by what percentage commercial properties have increased?
Yes, we do. And we get that information from the Department of Revenue. So again, as I said before, it's a good question because, again, we had a modest increase from the prior year. So in the case of single family, I think this is your question. In the case of single family, the value increase was 0.9%. In the case, this is interesting, in the case of condos, it's 9.5%. In the case of apartments, it's 8.3%. In the case of multi-residential, it's 2.3%. And then the balance are small percentages. So that's the bulk of it. So you see, the biggest value leader is condos. And it makes sense because it validates the flatness of the single-family rise year over year. COVID, inflation, high building materials costs, and so forth, it's a limiting factor to buying a single-family residence. So people shift to condos and apartments. And these value increments in those subcategories, I think, tend to prove that out. Does that answer your question?
And so what is that answers my question for residential.
Mm-hmm.
What is the percentage, the average percentage real estate value increase for commercial properties from last year?
It's actually a slight decrease, okay?
Okay.
It's about 0.1%.
Okay.
And for industrial, it would be 0.4%, personal about 0.5%.
And then I think the last couple of years, we were given information on how many commercial properties or commercial businesses there are, and how many from that are small business that would qualify under the small business exemption. Do you have that
Yes,
data?
I do. So we have approximately 402. Now, these are parcels, okay, because that's
not
the
businesses.
criteria, not the
Yep.
number of businesses. So we have approximately 402 parcels. Of that, 259 qualify. That's 65%.
Thank you.
That's a very high number.
And then I really liked slide, the last slide, Sam, slide 24, that shows the comparison between last year and this fiscal year. Is it possible for our packet next time to give us the second half of that from 1.21 to the 1.5? Because I recall when we were looking at setting the rate last year and possibly the year before, there were some of the board members were kind of looking at what is that. We use the data for greater than 1.2 to look at how it would compare. And I know we could do the calculation ourselves, but I have trouble doing the mental gymnastics in real time on slide 23 and 22. So I was just wondering, is it difficult to provide the rest
No.
of that table?
No.
So could we just get
You want to
that
do
for
that next year?
No.
next
no,
meeting?
Oh, next meeting?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I could do that.
Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. Pat, any questions? George? Okay, this is a public hearing. Is there anybody in the audience here that would like to address the board about this tax classification? Okay, Mr. Harrington, you have to come up to the microphone.
Thank you, Chairman. I have to state, in all the years I've been before boards like this, select boards, I have never seen a presentation as well done as tonight. It gave everybody here and the residents the meat of what really happens in assessments and so forth. And I got to thank Sam and his group people here that did that. By far, it gave a lot of information so you make a proper decision. And I go back to about 1990 when I've been before these boards. George, you were not there then. However,
1890, no, you didn't.
however, as the executive secretary, as the executive of the Chelmsford Business Association, we have, since 1990, have opposed splitting the tax rate. We feel businesses in this town and the population of this town, we do not need something like that. It gives a division between us and them. And furthermore, what a lot of people do not understand is the business community does pay a lot of fees and so forth. There's stuff out there, for example, recently we have storm drainage charge. It depends on the amount of space you have on your driveways. You charge for that. The business community in industrial, we pay more. If my property in Chelmsford Center has a driveway that's smaller, it's smaller than my house, it's a driveway, Chelmsford Center pays more because it's commercial. My property has a larger driveway, I pay less. And stuff like that goes right along. Whether it's dumpster fees or other fees, you name the fee or the charge, in there, the commercial and businesses pay more. It's built in our property. If, for example, my house, if the address was 10 Summer Street, that's where the liquor store is, I would be paying a lot less than what is being paid right now for that property. It's about $20,000 plus a year. And my tax rate on my property at 149 Boston Road is not that high. The point I'm trying to say is commercial property pays more. The rate always hits higher on the business, industrial, and businesses. Why? It's just the system it works. What we do not like, or we don't feel it's fair, is you're singling us out to pay more above everything else. And what it boils down to, we've had so many hearings, not this type of a hearing, but committees put together to talk about classification. What's the benefit? What's this? What's that? Why should they pay more? Why should they pay less? Et cetera, et cetera. What it boils down to is the board right here. You make the decision. Sam provided a tremendous amount of stuff here, right here to us to look at. He could have provided nothing, and you still would make that decision. How do you make that decision? I've been here 30-plus years, and I've seen how different boards made the decision. They made it because of politics. Bottom line, you have the power to switch it over. Who are you're punishing? Many of us are residents of this town. We pay our home taxes as well as our business taxes, and we hire people, and we hire full-time people, and we hire kids in this town to work part-time at our stores. We generate money within the community. And a lot of us feel this tax classification is highly unfair. With that being said, I'm asking this board to take a look and say, listen, let's get back to parity like it used to be. Just a little bit knowledge. Back when classification come in, the reason it was voted in was Dennis Reddy and his board at the time felt 5% would help jumpstart sewage. How long ago was that? That's why they put it in. For part of the town, which was North Chelmsford at the time, had to be sewage because of all the mills. And as time went on and the town voted to have the whole town put under sewage, you had the chairman, Dennis Reddy, come before the select board and say, we don't need it anymore. The reason we put it in was for that issue, not now. And if you look at it, another thing that Sam mentioned, can this board classify residents? Am I right, Sam? Did I miss that?
Well, technically, they can.
Well, how would the residents feel if the board says, okay, we're going to classify, the residents? Businesses do not have the vote, but in this town we have a lot of votes because we are residents. What I'm trying to say is, let's start rolling it back again. If you could, give it a thought, but give the businesses a little shot and whittle it down again like it used to be. It used to be, we finally got it down to parity. Maybe in George's life, we might be able to do that again. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to address the board about this? Is there anybody?
There's no one on Zoom.
No one on Zoom.
So, Madam Chair, if I may?
Do you have a question?
I do.
I'm sorry.
I do.
Go-
I have
I'm
a
sorry.
question
Go
to
ahead.
Sam.
Go ahead.
Sam, just for my own, trying to figure this out. So the commercial levy, 25, roughly, the commercial valuation, 544, 650, right? So I'm just trying to figure out how the funding gets dispersed and spread to the next class of commercial owners. So if I take the 544 times 65%, 65% of that 544 is getting an exemption.
No, I don't,
No?
no. I think what you're talking about is the percentage that each property class contributes to the total tax levy.
Well, what I'm trying to figure out is what gets passed on from the the commercial entities that get the exemption, what the figure is that gets passed on to the 35% that don't get the commercial
Well, again, on
exemption?
the small commercial exemption, the total number of parcels that qualify, which looks like 259 would qualify. Whatever that tax bill is for those 259 properties, you take 10% of that number.
Would that be the 544, 650?
No. It would be because the 544 commercial is all commercial properties, including the non-exempts. Okay, so we're only talking those parcels that qualify for the exemption. And I'm sorry, I could go back and calculate that number for you if you'd like, because I have to do the slide for the next meeting anyway. But that amount of exempted tax revenue, 10% of the folks of the tax bill for the folks that qualify, that amount of money is now superimposed on the tax bills of all the other commercial and industrial property owners, not just commercial, okay?
All right. Yeah, actually, I would like that figure.
Okay, I'll get that for you. Yeah, that's easy to calculate.
Okay.
So Sam, kind of on that same topic, the 259 that qualify, do they have to ask for that, or is it automatic?
Well, if we have them on file, it'll be automatic, but they can apply, and we usually get those that do apply every year. And I'm trying to remember if we ever refused any. I don't think so. I think those that apply generally qualify, because they know what the requirement is.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay. and
So
if there's-
just, Madam Chair, just so I'm clear, so you're holding the public hearing open for another 2 weeks. We'll be
Correct.
back in 2 weeks.
Correct.
Selectman Timmons would like an extension of the last slide. Selectman Maloney would like to know the amount of exempt property tax for the small commercial, and we'll have those numbers for you.
Yeah, and
if you're documenting the answers to your questions, I tried to jot it all down, but the question regarding the relative increase in property values, and then the number of parcels in the categories, if that's easy to just put in writing, that would be helpful.
Yep, I have it.
Thank you.
Okay. I was trying to keep the slides as clean as I could.
No, they're very good slides.
Excellent job, Sam.
And if anybody else has any questions you think of after this meeting, you probably have until, the end of this week to ask you, so to give you time to get that done.
Call, yeah, just call. Call the office and we'll take those. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
So we'll take a motion to continue.
I'll make a motion to continue the public hearing until
14th.
until November 14th.
18.
November 18th. I'll make a motion to continue the public hearing until November 18th.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. All right, next up is Christine Clancy. She's all ready to speak.
Hello. I was here last week providing the monthly ARPA presentation. As you know, we are quickly racing to the deadline of this end of December, allocating all or procuring all the remaining funds. I did update the spreadsheet from last week. We are updating it almost daily. But really tonight I wanted to come before you and just make a request for some additional allotments to allocations so that we can head towards procurement. As these projects come in, as bids come in, some prices might fluctuate. So we want to come up with a contingency of projects. Also, in the update from last week, I did go through each one of the projects, and there were some freeing up of funds to allocate. Largely, that was because of the senior center HVAC project that's wrapping up. I was still holding a contingency, and we've verified that amount, so we were able to take some out of that and put it back into an account, or put it back to where it can be allocated. Also, in the spreadsheet, it was numbers 21, 22, the social worker, human health services, and the public health associate, and the frontline initiative police department. These were all funds that we were allocated and spent based as needed to hire staff. Following the end of this year, we won't be able to have a contract in place, and so that was also money that's anticipated to be replenished back into the account. Also going through updating all the other items, really refining these numbers. And with that, it allows potentially $200,000 that could still go towards projects. So, like I said, it all depends on how the final numbers will come in the next month and a half. But we've created a short list of other projects. And we do have a project, switchgear, on here. We had recently added, and we are headed towards, that's actually going out to bid next week. In finalizing those documents, we did get an updated cost estimate, and it is much more costly than we originally anticipated. And it's also recommended as really a two-phase or potentially two different types of contractors would upgrade the switchgear.
What line is that?
This is line item
Is that 67?
60. Yes, sorry, for some reason.
Oh, I see it. Thank
So
you.
67, I had updated, the original budget was 175. And actually for that phase of just the main panel, that is actually closer to about 150, but then also the panel boards are recommended to be refurbished as part of that. That could be done separately. So going back to my notes from a couple of years ago, our plan was to do that as the initial phase and then do the panel boards a few years later. Now that we're 2 years and we haven't done anything, now it's recommended we probably do both at the same time. Still probably two separate bids because potentially two different contractors would do the work. So that is one proposed project that we are recommending. Both projects we are finalizing the bid documents. Those would go out to bid. The bid start date, I believe, is next week. And we would open bids just after Thanksgiving. We are estimating that second switchgear project to be $225,000. If for some reason it comes in a little over that, we also have ways of allocating those additional funds, whether it be through our facilities operations budget and also in talking with the school department. So I think that is a great candidate because it is very much needed. The switchgear, that is what, when the electricity comes into the building, that's what steps down the electricity. McCarthy, one being the oldest school, that switchgear is original to the building. Right now we're putting together a capital request for the next, we put together a 5-year plan. Switchgear refurbishments we're looking at those over the next 5-10 years. All the switchgears are original to the building. These are just refurbishments, not replacements. Replacements would be potentially millions of dollars. And I guess that is an attractive project because we essentially have all the technical documents and we're just putting the bid requests out. The next two items are much smaller items, but one is we have one fuel tank system at the police station. It is getting older, so we're just getting a quote to see if there's any repairs needed for the system. This would probably be just more of a quote-based procurement, so relatively straightforward. Also, the vendor we're working with is on the state contract. And then the last item, and we see this as a need looking at the next year or two. Last week I was here talking about a drainage easement. We have we also at town meeting put forth Parkhurst to be accepted. With all of those acceptances, whether it be a drainage easement, utility easement, or roadway acceptances that has a survey request, we can do some surveying in-house, but when we do these acceptance and easements, we do seek outside services. So I was working with the engineering department to put together essentially some type of service on-call contract where we could have surveying services instead of procuring a quote each time it's needed, having someone on call. That is estimated $50,000. We could also adjust that slightly up or down as needed. So I guess the request, and also available to answer any questions, but the request tonight is to move forward towards putting these out to bid. A lot of the bids will be coming in around the same time. Now we're looking at first week in December to second week in December. December 23rd is your last meeting, so we're close, but a lot of things are going to come in at that date.
Okay, any questions for Christine? All right. Everybody okay with letting her move forward with these?
Indeed.
Okay.
Thank you.
We have a motion?
I will make a motion to, am I authorizing the town manager or just to allocate?
Appropriate the ARPA funds.
Yeah, I think it's,
I'll make a motion to appropriate the $200,000 in remaining ARPA funds for allocation to the 3 projects, the McCarthy Switchgear Phase 2 panel board refurbishment, the police state fuel state assessment and repairs to extend life expectancy of the system, and the request for miscellaneous surveying services. As
Second.
presented.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, our manager reports.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a brief report this evening, and to inform you as well as the community formally, since our last meeting, the town through the select board has received the another proposed Chapter 40B application to notification to Mass Housing, and this pertains to the project known as Riverneck Estates at 243 Riverneck Road. This is actually 2 applications, although it's one site and one project, and this was before the board recently for a local initiative request. This would be, one project is 7 home ownership units, and then the other is 16 rental units on the approximately 9.41 acres of land located at 243 Riverneck Road. As is the process, and we've been through this a few times the last several months, the Mass Housing is soliciting comments from the local community and concerns raised by town boards, officials, and other interested parties. The deadline for submitting the comments from the community is December 2nd. And they've also scheduled a site visit for next Wednesday, November 13th at 11 a.m. at the site. So how this will work is, although the board did receive comments for the prior local initiative for affordable housing project at the site, we intend to go out and re-ask the department so that we have contemporary comments. That way, if they get forwarded to Mass Housing, at least they show that they're current, not dated from several weeks prior with the initial application. And also if there's any concerns that they may have on the proposed plan, which is quite lengthy in terms of the size of the application material. And we're still awaiting the actual receipt of a thumb drive and written printout of those materials because it is a significant project.
Will we also be taking public input at our next meeting?
Yes,
since
with
this
comments.
is a new
Yes,
application?
With comments,
and it will be on December 2nd. I have gotten approval to submit that letter a couple days later.
Oh, okay.
So we will do that on December 2nd.
Oh, okay. And you'll notify the
Yes.
public?
Yep.
Yes, we'll notify the
Is there-
rebutters, yeah.
Is there a way that they can have access to a location where the drawings are? I know it's a large packet, but.
Yeah, we're trying, like I said, we want to put them in our public file so that they can access them. Right now, it's so extensive that we've asked for the thumb drive so we can just plug it in and put it on our website, but that hasn't happened because otherwise it's a big manual thing of downloading it from the link that was provided. But yes, we'll get it out there and we'll put a notice out that the plan is available for viewing, the board welcomes comments, and then the board will discuss it at its December 2nd meeting.
And then, can I ask another question about
Sure.
inputs?
Yep.
So given the location of this proposal, will we be asking formal inputs from the Water District and from the Conservation Commission?
Yeah, oh, yes, definitely.
Like,
Yes.
more formal than we got like last time,
Yeah.
where it came piecemeal?
And any comments that we did receive before will be included too. So,
Yeah.
the departments don't need to go to a lot of work and reinvent the wheel, basically. So we will do that.
Right. And then the second matter in my report, and again, this arose since our last meeting, we did receive formal notification from the Massachusetts School Building Authority when they met on October 30th that they voted to invite the town of Chelmsford into the accelerated repair program for the schematic design study at the South Row Elementary School for potential partial roof replacement project. This is the one we obtained funding for at the fall annual town meeting, anticipating correctly in this case that we would be invited in. The town, as we'd explained at that time, the town has to submit the required certified documentation to the MSBA within 120 days, including the appropriation of funding, which we explained at fall town meeting. That's why we were asking for it, to avoid the calling of a special town meeting. So later this week, once the election passes, and also the 7-day expiration expired today for the town meeting certification. As you know, there's a provision under the town charter that any town meeting vote has 7 days, not including Sundays and holidays, in which you could have a petition. That period has lapsed. So once the election clears later this week, I'll ask for the clerk's office for the certification of the vote at town meeting. We also will provide the document of the compliance certification, which is, standard. The superintendent of schools has reviewed it, the school committee chair. I reviewed it, I provided it to you. So we will, even though we have 120 days to do this, we'll have this done basically within 30 days. And again, it's not going to move us much faster because they've already explained to us that this project would not, because of their funding schedule, would not occur till the summer of '26. So we just wanted to let people know that that this is moving forward. The other thing to note, which is of interest as we're doing capital planning, as was mentioned earlier, for this year, the MSBA and their accelerated repair program only would accept roofs that were 25 years or older, which meant obviously, installed on or before 1999. And for window and door systems, they had to be 30 years or older. And they didn't even accept for boilers this year. So we consider that when we're doing the capital planning process, which proposals are being compiled now by the finance director, and they're going to begin their process a week from this Thursday. Capital Planning Committee, those meetings will be posted, and there'll be 2 meetings in November. Obviously, they're not going to meet Thanksgiving week, and then they'll wrap up in December, the first Thursday, assuming no weather conflicts. So that's how that's unfolding. And obviously, there are, as was noted, in addition to the switchgear, there are a number of roof projects, particularly in school buildings, and we're looking to see, can we bridge to that 20-plus year period, 25-year period, in order to get the state reimbursement. As you can see, the reason the state pushes that criteria out is because they only have so much funding, and so we're going to try to see what we can do, because it is significant to get a 50% reimbursement as opposed to no state reimbursement. So that's what's happening with MSBA on those projects since our last meeting a week ago. And then I do have, well, that's all I have under my report this evening.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we do have a couple of appointments. One is a select board appointment for Megan Riley to the DEI committee. Anybody have any comments about this appointment? Okay, we'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion to appoint Megan Ryle to the Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Committee.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and now Paul has an appointment.
Yeah, and then I have an application since our last meeting for the Center Village Master Plan Committee. As a resident in the Center Village who lives on Sinai Circle, Doreen Deschler is requesting to be appointed to the committee. Therefore, I'll seek your approval to appoint her for an unexpired term ending June 30th, 2026.
Okay, any questions about this appointment? I'll have a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the town manager appointment of Doreen Deschler to the Center Village Master Plan Committee for an unexpired 3-year term ending June 30th, 2026.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, and we have no minutes this evening, so we'll go right to liaison reports. George, anything? Pat? Erin? Virginia?
I just have one. The North Chelmsford Water District is going to have to insert new isolation valves as part of the DPW's Middlesex Bridge Street repair, or Middlesex Street Bridge repair. And the actual replacement date is unknown, but in preparation for that, they're going to conduct a mock shutdown of the water system around Brickhouse Pizza on November 14th. And they're going to notify their affected customers on the website and via Facebook. and they're going through the mock shutdown. It'll be about an hour to affect the water system so that they can mitigate any longer shutdowns during the actual repairs. So if you have any questions, you can contact the North Chelmsford Water District directly at 978-251-3931, and just keep an eye on their website and their Facebook page.
Okay, yeah, since we just had a meeting last week, I don't have much either. We did have a ribbon cutting late last week at 9 Round. It's a fitness facility on Summer Street where in a half an hour you can get all of your muscles stretched that you need to. So George, you should head over there right after we leave here. And they're going to be open 24 hours a day pretty soon.
I ain't got that many muscles.
And lastly, just another reminder, as we had from the very beginning of this meeting, tomorrow is your deadline to vote. You have until 8 o'clock on Tuesday night, so everybody get out and vote. So with that, we'll take a motion for executive session.
I'll make a motion to adjourn to executive session for the purpose of considering the acquisition of real property not to return.
Second.
Okay, it's a roll call vote. George?
Aye.
Pat?
Aye.
Erin?
Aye.
Virginia?
Aye.
And I'm aye. We are adjourned to executive session.